This podcast is a proud member of the Lamb Podcasting Network. Find the network at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello and welcome to episode 66 of the 1001 Movies podcast, based on the book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. This week I'll be talking about Whisky Galore, the 1949 comedy directed by Alexander Mackenrick.
Yes, Mr. Waggett?
Captain Waggett, if you don't mind. I want to speak to your son, George.
George is in his bedroom.
Oh, not ill, I hope.
He's locked in his bedroom with his Bible and some bread and cheese, and he'll not be let out till tomorrow morning.
I never heard anything so preposterous.
Have you ever heard of the fourth commandment?
Of course I have.
Remember...
You needn't repeat it. I learned the commandment years ago.
More shame to you, then, that you should lead my son away from righteousness.
Mrs. Campbell, at this very moment, our troops are fighting in North Africa. The Germans don't stop fighting on Sunday, so how can we?
What the Germans do, Mr. Waggett, is on their own conscience. And Toddy is not in North Africa, so there's no need to bring the heathens into it. I've been told that there are cannibals in Africa, but no one is going to persuade my son to eat human flesh.
No one's asking your son to eat human flesh.
Not yet.
On February 5th, 1941, something happened off the island of Eriskay in northern Scotland that would become somewhat of a legend for many years. The SS politician, after leaving Liverpool, ran aground during a storm, leaving all on board unharmed, but scattering Eriskay with rumors of what was left aboard the ship. 22,000 cases of whiskey, all of it en route to Jamaica and New Orleans. With the local stores of whiskey gone from wartime rationing, the inhabitants wasted little time in salvaging 7,000 cases, or more, depending on one source, before the remains of the ship broke up, and it and the remainder of its cargo sank to the bottom of the ocean. The islanders thought nothing of their pilfering, figuring that what they took was already abandoned, but this riled local customs officer Charles McCall, whose mission was to uncover each stolen bottle because not a penny had been paid by the local imbibers. One member of the Home Guard, stationed on the island, Compton Mackenzie, watched the activity with amusement from afar, and he would later write a book about the incident called, appropriately, Whisky Galore. By the mid-1940s, England's Ealing Studios was using the work of wartime documentarians to churn out a number of war pictures, and eventually, likely realizing that thrilling wartime movies were wearing off on post-war audiences, decided to try their hand at making comedies like they did back in the 1930s. With this in mind, Ealing paid Compton Mackenzie £500 for the rights to Whisky Galore, and would eventually bring him on to co-write the screenplay as well. To direct, they hired a first-timer, Alexander Mackenrick, who at the time was a production designer for Ealing, although he had experience in filmmaking during the war while working with the Minister of Information, as well as writing a number of commercials. The film was made during the summer of 1948 on the island of Barra, which proved to be extremely ill-timed. The crew was plagued with storms and heavy wind, and shooting went 5 weeks over schedule, a total of 15 weeks in all. Differing opinions on the tone of the movie didn't help, as Mackendrick felt that Captain Waggett, the story's parallel to the real-life Charles McCall, should be the protagonist of the story, while at least one of the producers felt that the true heroes of the story were the local townsfolk. This carried on even in post-production, when producer Michael Balkin ordered that the film be heavily cut and hired another director to shoot additional scenes at Ealing. This must have extremely irked Mackendrick, who not only was assigned to second unit work during this additional filming, but also looked back on the final product as unbelievably amateurish. While its production was fraught with problems, it was all worth it in the end. The English press all raised a toast to Whisky Galore, and it became the film that put Ealing Studios on the world's map of cinema. When it was released in the United States, American censors may have raised an eyebrow or two at the name of the film, and it was renamed Tight Little Island. 1949 turned out to be a wonderful year for Ealing, and they simultaneously released two other comedies, Passport to Pimlico and Kind Hearts and Coronets, cementing them in the history of cinematic English comedy. Alexander Mackenrick shared in Ealing's glory, and he would go on to direct one or two other comedies, including The Lady Killers and Sweet Smell of Success, both of which are subjects for later episodes. In 2016, a remake was made of Whisky Galore, directed by Gillies McKinnon and starring Eddie Izzard as Captain Waggett. If you've never heard of it, don't feel bad. Neither did I, and currently it enjoys a rating of 5.1 on IMDb. The infamy of the wreck of the SS politician never died, and in 2001, it was revealed from files in the Public Records Office that the ship was carrying nearly 290,000 10-shilling notes, the equivalent of several million pounds today. Whatever happened to the missing cash remains a mystery, although reports say that some of the islanders were responsible for distributing the notes, and if they were, then most of them took their secret to the grave. What did I think of Whisky Galore? I dislike using single words to describe movies or books and try to refrain from using broad negative words like boring or stupid. And while I don't wish to use any such words to describe this film, I think the single word twee sums it up nicely. There is nothing in this story that will make one laugh out loud, or perhaps even remember it sometime after viewing it, and I think it's in the 1001 Movies book simply for its place in English cinema history more than anything else. That being said, there are a couple of great themes running along beneath the surface, and the disagreement between Mackendrick and the producers may have damaged this message. On the one hand, you have the teetotaling Captain Waggett, who does everything by the book and will stop at nothing to recover the stolen whiskey. On the other hand, you have the townsfolk, who really don't think they're breaking the law and just want to sit out the ration with a boat full of free whiskey. What results in the film's final moments is a chess game with authority, a figurative up yours to Waggett and everything he stands for. If that's what the filmmakers were going for, they seemed to succeed in spades, at least until the film's closing lines, which follow.
Whisky galore. Even after our private store was exhausted, there were stocks of legitimate whiskey. But the price went up, and then it went up again, until nobody on Tuddy could afford even a dram. So they all lived unhappily ever after. Oh, except Sergeant Odd and his Peggy, for they were not whiskey drinkers. And if that isn't a moral story, what is?
Do they just disparage every effort made by the lovable townsfolk to praise the actions of the only couple on the island who didn't drink? Not only is it unfair to the characters, but it's a slap in the face of the audience who just spent the last 82 minutes of their lives rooting for what the voiceover seems to think of as a bunch of drunken reprobates. The final quote aside, the remainder of the film is quite steady in tone, and overall a solid piece of work. One wonders why Alexander Mackenrick thought it was so amateurish. Was it because he genuinely believed so, or was it because of the trials and tribulations he went through during production? I don't usually comment on the quality of the DVD productions of these films, but I'm going to make an exception in this case. The current Region 1 release of this film is from a company called GMG Media Group, and while I appreciate that somebody is willing to make this available for home viewing, the quality of the recording is terrible, and it looks as though someone made a copy of an old VHS tape. Get a copy of the Region 2 release if you can, and somebody tell the Criterion Collection to get on this one. That's all I have to say about Whisky Galore. Tune in next week when I talk about 1995's The Usual Suspects, directed by Bryan Singer. In the meantime, feel free to email me any questions or comments at 1001moviespodcast@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter at 100moviespc, or look for the podcast's Facebook page. Until next time, happy viewing.